I am Isabel Lyons Williams, and it's Isabel, and Lyons, Lyons, and Williams, Williams.
Thank you. And when did your family come to this area of the St. Lucie River?
My family came in 1913. In fact, went to Miami first, and my father asked for him to tell him a quiet little fishing village where he could go and hunt and fish and regain his health. He was actually sent here from the Chicago area, where the doctors had told him that he had bronchitis so bad that if he didn't get to a warm climate, that he was going to be in serious trouble. So in Miami, they said, well, we know about a little town named Stewart, and which we think will fill the bill for you. And so that's how we happened to come to Stewart. There was my mother and father, and my brother, who was about 9 years old, and I was 2 years old. So I don't recall too much of that period, except for what has been told to me. And
tell me your father's name.
My father's name was Harry L. Lyons.
A little of his background and what he was doing before he came here.
Well, he was, I think you would call him pretty much a land promoter. He had been in the Seattle area putting on land promotion deals, and so we moved back to the Chicago area, where he was doing the same thing when his health became very bad. So that's how we happened to come to Stewart. So he did not really go into any work. He and my brother just spent their time going to the woods and fishing, hunting, and just enjoying themselves. They just fell in love with the beauty and the of the outdoors. Of course, the river was just alive with fish, and there was what hunting they did. They could go out in the woods and do some hunting, but I think mostly they did fishing. So naturally, it wasn't long before he was in very healthy state, and but we lived here. We had a little cottage on 2nd Street, right near the Walter Kitching house, right near the river. So we knew, well, the population was very small, I think about 500 people. So it was just like one big family in this area then. There was no bridge across the river. There was a ferry, and as I say, it was a very friendly little town, and everyone knew everybody else, and of course, what everybody was doing also. But we we were fortunate to know the pioneer families, people like the Walter Kitchings and the John Taylors and Judge and Mrs. Matthews, and of course the Dyer family. It was all, the center of town was right over by the river and right where our Main Street area is now. And all the business activity was centered there. And about 1914, I think, that was when Stewart was organized as a city. I do recall that it was Mr. McDonald was the first mayor. So it was a very friendly little town. Yeah, we did have a drugstore, and I think there was a bank there, and of course a department store. It was called Kitchen and Eckes, and so most of the business activity all centered around that, and people would come on Saturday. Saturday was the big day for people from the country to come into town, and then the stores would stay open till late Saturday night, so they could accommodate the country people. And even the Indians, I can recall the Seminoles would come to town too, bringing their huckleberry baskets and selling huckleberries and buying their goods at the different stores, mostly at the grocery stores and the dry goods stores. I think and they had a habit of just going in and buying one item at a time. That was their Indian way of doing things. So it was a very happy, carefree life, and I'm sure that was one reason why my brother was several years older than me. I think he was about 7 years older. He just loved this outdoor life, and I think that was really gave him a foundation for his writings, as later he became a writer with the and reporter with the Stewart News, and he could really write about those early days. So it was a wonderful period for him.
Your brother's name?
Yes, his name was Ernest Fulton Lyons.
And when your family came, did they stay from then on, or did they go back?
As a family, we stayed here until about 1918. It was the end of World War I. And I date that because my mother and my brother and I went for a stay in Mississippi, where my mother had been born and raised. We went to Laurel, Mississippi for a period, and I can remember them holding me up to see General Pershing as he was on the rear platform of the train, and held me up to see him. And of course, he was the head general for the World War I for the United States. So after our visit there, we joined my father in Chicago, and we lived at Evanston, Illinois, and my father went into real estate there for a firm called McGuire and R. And he promoted a land deal, which was called Kenilworth subdivision on the North Shore of Chicago. And I remember going with him as a little girl to see these two Irish sisters, where he arranged the deal to buy this property. It was just a cornfield, and it became a very successful subdivision and became one of the most outstanding residential areas in the United States, and it still is. It's a beautiful area. So that was a very prosperous deal for my father, and we would at that period we would come back to Stewart as winter visitors. For about 3 years we would come down and find a place to stay and be winter visitors. But the Florida boom came along, and naturally, being a real estate man, that was too much for my father. He had to get into the real estate business in Stewart, and so we sold our property, our home in Evanston, and moved down to Stewart, made our home here. And he put on a subdivision called St. Lucie Estates, which is, his firm was called Lyons, Atkin, and Innes. And he had an office right there on Main Street in, it's Osceola Street in Stewart. And that was very successful, and there were beautiful homes built there. It was actually a big citrus area, so there are still fruit trees there that were in the original subdivision, but it is still considered a very attractive area. And but at that same time, he also put on a subdivision called Seminole Shores. That was at the north end of town. There was an arch up there, and the city limits of Stewart this arch is still there. And at one time, later, when the city limits of Stewart were reduced, they called it the entrance to Jensen. And now I see they call it the entrance to Rio. But it does show how the Stewart area contained, of course, at that period, that was when Martin County was formed. That was when we were just getting so prosperous, and we were the northern part of Palm Beach County and part of St. Lucie County. So we didn't feel we were getting the favors we needed, that we were neglected, and we wanted to become a county independently. So this big effort was made. My father was very involved, being a real estate man, and he put up, I remember he put up some money. All the business people were asked to put up $1,000 to help get this through the legislature. And when they got this idea of having it named for Governor Martin, well, that kind of had a great influence with the governor. Really helped to push that through. It was an honor to him, so that's how it happened to be named for Governor Martin. He felt quite honored about it. So So they decided to have a big celebration and name and have the governor come down, and so that took place, and I think that celebration was in January, wasn't it? Of 26,
Correct.
1926. That was the height of the boom days. And there was a big parade arranged, uh, and so that we have quite a few pictures. I don't know that we had any movie of that. Do you recall? Did we have? No, I don't think so. But there was a wonderful turnout for the parade, and all the school children and participated, and my class and Virginia Brox was in my class too. We represented the old settlers, and we carried these placards with the different names of the old settlers, and we marched in the parade, and but I think all the school children took part in it, and there were cars all decorated, and bands. We had some bands playing, and had a big barbecue and fish fry, and then later there was a big banquet at the Pelican Hotel. And I did attend that with my parents. I guess I was a teenager by then, and I do remember attending that. And then I think there was a big dance far into the night at they had a yacht club here out in the river. I think there was a big dance, so the festivities went on for several days. And so Martin County was really inducted into being with a big celebration. Oh yes, all the school children were given free ice cream cones. But it wasn't too long till see my father put on he started a subdivision at what was called River Forest. That was in the southern part of, well, it was almost out in this area here where South Fork High School is, just on the headwaters of the North Fork. There was an island there.
Don't you mean South Fork?
What's that?
Headwaters
of the
South
South Fork. That's right, yes. Not the North Fork, the South Fork. There's a little island there called Treasure Island. So as part of this setting up this opening day, my father had a bag of gold coins buried there for a treasure hunt. And as I recall, there's a little boy, his last name was Reddick, and I don't recall his first name, but I do know he found the bag of gold coins, and he was so happy, and they had his picture in the paper, and he was holding this bag of gold coins up. I'm sure in the back issues of the Stuart News we could find that picture sometime.
We have many pictures of that event, of not so much of finding the gold, but of motor launches with people and crowds of people. Were you there?
Yes. They had to ferry people across to the island. See, a lot of the activity went on in the island. So I don't know. But that was at the end of the boom, and that never really was realized as a development were never really places built there because the boom fell apart. By 1927, the boom was over, and people lost, well, it just fell apart. People lost their properties and left. They left the town, and those that stayed, few were fortunate enough to hold on to what they had, but then it became a very serious situation where people couldn't pay their taxes and lost their property, and that finally worked into the period called the Depression period. And it was a very, very difficult time economically for everyone all over the country. And that was the period when FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, came up with the WPA idea, work progress. And that I did see that in our area, and I even worked for the WPA. And by then I was out of school, and I got a job typing payrolls for the WPA. And so it was really such a blessing that this was a government project put on all over our country, because people were out of work. They really had no money even to buy groceries with, and banks had closed at the beginning of this period. There were not even any banks open because. But this was the beginning of restoring our country's economy, and it really, really did do that. It gave people work, and the first thing they did in our area was to build a new bridge. They just had a wooden bridge. A wooden bridge had been built across our river in about 1918, 1919, I think it was. Well, that was not in good shape by this time. By 1930, early 1930s, 1933, I think, it needed to be replaced. So that was the first job, and it gave work to so many men that were desperate for work. They even came from other areas to our areas and camped. They camped here, and they ran a schedule around the clock, and gave so many hours of work to these men that were so desperate for work. So there were also road projects and building projects like schools. They built new schools, and I know they built a women's club here. And I don't know, do you know of other?
The log cabin. The log cabin.
Oh yes, the log cabin, yes. That was one of the projects too. And later that was moved up to Jensen, to the Langford Park. It's still there, and it's used as a recreation center for Langford Park and for senior citizens. So
everything you've said fits right into the documentation, but the bridge that was built in 1917 was a concrete bridge.
I see.
But it was, everything else is correct. I mean, the fact that it was insufficient, and they needed
Yeah.
a better bridge. But the Palm City Bridge was wooden, but
Yes.
and they were built about the same time. But our bridge over the St. Lucie was concrete
Well,
before the Roosevelt Bridge.
I see. Well, I know there was a bridge at Jensen, and it was wooden, and it became very, very rickety.
Right.
But it was the only access that people had to get to the ocean. Before that, when we were here in early days, the only way we could get to the ocean was by boat. And I recall that Judge Matthews had a boat, and he would invite us to go for it would be an all-day outing to go up to the House of Refuge and to spend the day. And so that was always a great treat. But I don't, do you recall when the Jensen Beach Bridge was built?
1925,
Mm-hmm.
during the boom.
During the boom. So, but it was, of course, people had cars by then, and sometimes it would be bumper to bumper on weekends, just getting over there to the ocean, and somehow, and it was barely enough room for cars to pass, but somehow they managed to do it, and I don't ever recall of any serious problems. That was a wonderful project, because it was so popular. People just wanted to get to that ocean and go swimming and to fish. And so then later, when we had the bridges, the two bridges, I guess that was in the 50s, wasn't it? The Prairie Bridge and the Lyons Bridge. And of course, the Prairie Bridge was named for Evans Crary, who helped get that legislation through for it in Tallahassee. Then the Lyons Bridge was built for my brother to honor him and for his environmental work in this area. And of course, he did finally, I think it was about 1931, he applied for a job as reporter for the Stewart News. Mr. Menninger, Ed Menninger, was editor, and he had lost his longtime reporter, Mr. Walmsley. And so he hired my brother, and from then on he stayed with the Stewart News and eventually became the editor when Scripps Howard took it over. But he was a born writer. He's a born writer. He loved writing. He loved this area. And so when he would write a column, he had a column, the Ernest Lyons column in the Stewart News. And he would write about the early days, about the old timers that he knew, and about the beauty of the area, mostly the fishing and about nature and the river, especially the river. And he could see after the canals were built and water was opened up for the river, he could see how damaging it was going to be, and he really tried to start a battle to save our river then. But it just was something that needed more organization as we have it now. We now know what what the damage was to letting all that water come into our river. So we are trying to save it now. Well, so his columns were, when Scripps Howard bought the paper, they realized that his writings were of value, so they had it printed in book form, some of its best columns. That was, the first book was My Florida. It is in the library, and many have copies of that, but it is out of print now, and hopefully they will reprint it. But the other one is available in paperback. The Last Cracker Barrel.
There's a little irony in it that your father was such a great promoter of the canal and the dredging of the inlet and making of a port, and then perhaps it was a blessing that all these things, at least the port, didn't happen. Will you just talk about that aspect of the things that your father envisioned during the boom?
Well, that's true. He envisioned Stewart as having a harbor, and of course, when the Cross-State Canal was built, we were going to be a harbor here, and we have this canal that goes through, meets up with Lake Okeechobee and connects with to the west coast through the Caloosahatchee River. And so that was going to bring all kinds of business here, because we were going to have, it was going to cut the distance from going around Key West. You know, it was going to give a central area to go across the state, and going to make us a great harbor and a great, but somehow after the boom broke, of course, that just there was no money to carry through with anything of that kind. So it took many years to recover from that. The WPA period, the Depression period, did not recover. It only started the recovery. It only started it. It was a big struggle for people to get back on their feet. And of course, many people had left here, and new people were not coming in. But then the war period came along, and that did give people more work and more opportunities. But I really think it was the period when those two bridges were built across the Prairie Bridge across the St. Lucie, the Lyons Bridge across the Indian River, opened up Hutchinson Island. I really feel that was the period that opened up that area, and then people moved in here, and they've been moving in ever since. And of course, it did open up Hutchinson Island and brought those condos there, and of course, it brought our area began to grow from that period on. Before that, we just had our little downtown area, our little Main Street area on Osceola. That was downtown.
Do you think your father envisioned a city like Jacksonville or Tampa or Miami in this area?
Yes. I really think he felt we would become a big city. Yes, he had great ideas that way, that this was the gateway. This was the gateway to, well, to the Gulf of Mexico. I mean, he had that access to going right through. It was going to bring Stewart, make it a headquarters for as a harbor.
Do you think your brother Ernie would have liked it if it had turned out that way?
No, I don't. He liked it. His dream for himself was to be the country editor of a small town paper. That was his dream, and he succeeded in living that dream. He was the country editor, and when you remember the old Stewart News Building down there across from the courthouse, you could walk into that building, and everybody that worked there would be available to you. And the reporters, you could just go up to a reporter and talk to them, and you could go in and talk to him. He did have a little private corner, but it's when you look at what the Stewart News is now, it makes me think of a mausoleum, because you can't even have access to anybody. You go in and there's a receptionist, but you can't even speak to anybody unless they call upstairs to see whether, and that maybe they're so busy that they can't even see you. They'll take a message from you or something like that. And so it's not a little country newspaper anymore. It's a big city paper, and my brother always said that names were news. Names were news, and he lived that policy the whole time he was editor, because anybody that wanted something in the paper, or even all the little trailer parks had correspondents that wrote about all their activities, and they would send those well, of course it only came out about 2 times a week, you know. It wasn't a daily, it was at one period it was a daily even in the Depression days when Mr. Miniger had it, but then finally had to drop back to about a two times a week publication. And it wasn't until about the 60s that it became a daily again.
We should wind up, but maybe just comment, do you think that even when the boom burst and things were hard, that anybody regretted having a Martin County? Do you think at least that worked out, don't you?
Yes, I think everybody felt that was a wonderful thing that we became. County was made at the time that it was, because with the Palm Beach County, it's such a large county, and I think we never did get the benefit of what we got by being on our own, being independent. And we did take part of St. Lucie County, but not really as much as we took from Palm Beach County. And not only that, we have this agricultural area, you see, that goes to the lake. We go all the way out to Lake Okeechobee. And that gives us a big agricultural area where, you know, our the citrus area and the cattle area is a very important part of our economy.
Thank you.
Right.